Let's just be clear. I love to hunt people, but I'm doing it for them. I'm not doing it to them. Keep it real and keep it out there.
It's everywhere that's publicly available. So we look at what kind of job postings they have out there. Are they hiring for sales enablement? Do they have a high touch, or do they even have anything? Because they've never really structured a program. And then you're going to have companies that are maybe at a more mature stage. You want to pitch them what you have to sell is going to be very different.
And so you've built the algorithms to figure this all out.
We haven't really tapped that much into Facebook yet, which I think is a little bit noisier.
But can you actually do it yourself?
I think sometimes figure out what's different about the people. What is the relationship between the inputs and the outcome, and trying to understand what's going on. But if you're unable to explain anything, at the first error the algorithm is going to make, never want to hear about it again. Nobody is going to be able to go look under the hood to understand what happened. It's a terrible way to build a routing mechanism.
And how has it made it better?
From the ground up. That just means that we're able to spend more time on building new features, put them into
the sales machine, Rankins.
Let me do this thing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is Francis Brero, math nerd turned AI beast, co-founder of MadKudu, and the guy helping sales teams at places like Figma, Gong, and Dropbox close more deals with his hashtag Think Less approach. He's built search engines, led enterprise sales engineering, and now he's translating buyer signals into solid revenue. This guy is what I call a mad scientist. He's literally making success automatic by being scientific and building out and going from literally a math engineer and graduating from Stanford, building algorithms to actually find the buying signals. If you ever wanted to hack to scale your company better and faster, this is the hack. He's the founder of MadKudu, and he's been involved in sales and sales organizations like member of Modern Sales Pros. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him to the show. Welcome, Francis.
Hey, John. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So tell me about your journey and your interest in mathematics, because we're going to drive this all the way into AI and what's happening now. But I mean, you've been in this game building algorithms, even with your degree, studying in France and then going to Stanford and then learning all aspects of algorithms that eventually led us to AI. Tell me about your journey there and what really kept you interested and focused on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I started studying fundamental mathematics. I've just always been fascinated by numbers, and there's like a kind of a magical element to it, and the complexity of like solving problems, and like when you get to the resolution and you found a way to hack things together. It's something that's always inspired me. And I was fortunate enough to do one of my engineering internships at a startup just at the time when that company raised their Series A with Sequoia. So kind of like got exposed to what it was to just like translate this theoretical knowledge into actual like real world problems. And it was really exciting to see that a lot of the processes that I used to do problem solving and mathematics could apply to company building. And yeah, that kind of led me into the dark side of sales, as I like to call it, where you kind of start discovering that it's art and science. And while I think that the science part is probably seemed the easiest to me, I really fell in love with the craft of like trying to figure out how do I help people understand what their problem is. Like the whole idea of consultative selling was something that really appealed to me. And then that led me to start MadKudu, where we're really trying to give every single company the ability to run data science on top of their data to power their go-to-market motions without needing to hire an actual data scientist who would both understand how to do data mining and at the same time understand sales, because it's not just a matter of running numbers, it's also running numbers purposely, and knowing what is the question we're trying to answer is often a lot harder than answering the question itself.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm aware of what you do and how you built MadKudu, but how did you come across the hack of, because, I do sales training all the time. Yesterday, I was doing sales training with my guys. I wrote on the board a chain link, and we're only as strong as the weakest link in building out a pipeline, in actually marketing and attracting individuals. And so my data science mind says, okay, if you cannot find them online, go knock on their door because I made my first $1 million knocking on doors. So, for me, it's not that difficult to figure out. But what you guys are doing and, building out search engines and now using AI, how did you come across the actual data that you can actually find signals in the marketplace of people searching for you already, which is a total hack, right? And it's an unfair advantage to those who know. Because if you talk about signals, even 5 years ago, people would ask you, what do you mean by signals?
Yeah, I think before that, people would say intent or some kind of obscure, it felt like black magic. I think the way we came across this, I think was what I would consider to be fairly straightforward. We took really successful and smart salespeople and we tried to understand what is the common pattern, like where do they find these people that are willing to engage and ready to buy, and how do we actually kind of extract what can be automated from this, and how do we kind of systematize their process. And it's been it was a very interesting journey of trying to take things that might seem very intuitive to a great seller, like even the idea of like, if I'm not finding them online, I just go knock on doors. But you're not going to just go knock on any random door. You're already picking like what kind of zip codes you go for. Like you have an intuitive sense of where the value and the money might be. And it's like trying to extract that deep knowledge out of your brain to systematize it and almost like build an algorithm to mimic that kind of thought process. That was kind of our approach. It's almost like, like as a neuroscience, almost like trying to figure out like what is going on in your brain that led you to find these great opportunities, and how do we mimic that process programmatically?
Yeah. And so do you find a lot of people that come to MadKudu, organizations, businesses, individuals, because today, I mean, you can have a company of 10 or 20 in AI trailblazing a new startup, and they could be literally generating tens of millions of dollars. It doesn't even need an army anymore. Do you ever find it, and does your company help individuals figure out what is their ICP? Because that's what you touched on. Well, who are they finding and where are they at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that we always look at. Again, it's if you're trying to replicate the success of salespeople, you're looking at, okay, what are the deals that they've closed? What is different about them compared to the ones that they didn't close or didn't make it to like a qualified opportunity? And from there, you're able to start this deciphering what is going to be what makes an ICP, right? Like what are the different things that make an ideal customer based on what we've seen, success with historically or not. So that's generally kind of the starting point where you want to figure out, okay, there's a universe of leads out there. Like what is the pool of leads that I can sell to that fit my ideal customer profile because they match, historical customers? And then how do I go after them? And that's where, again, then you look at how reps are doing that, figure out where are the pools of different ICPs, and you just start hunting there.
Yeah. And I love it. And I love to hunt people, not animals. So let's just be clear. I love to hunt people, but I'm doing it for them. I'm not doing it to them. All right. I want to help people. And for me, sales is a service. So I'm just going to keep it real and keep it out there. So I work with companies that are manufacturing, distribution companies that have over 100 employees doing over $5 million in business, that have full-time employees and have field sales reps. So that's how I nail down my ICP, because I know, one, they have money, two, they'll invest in their people, and three, most of them, especially if they're legacy businesses, are using Excel spreadsheets and they're in chaos and they cannot make sense of their data in less than 5 or 6 weeks. So that's my own ICP. But essentially, you're helping companies with MadKudu go out there and search the internet. Do you also find social signals from social media? Like, how do you extract the signals? Is it just on Google? Is it just on search engines, or is it on social as well?
It's everywhere that's publicly available. So it is social, like LinkedIn in B2B is generally a pretty good source. It could be Twitter. Like those are kind of the main ones for smaller businesses. It could be like looking at reviews on Google or on Yelp. But what's interesting is that it generally goes a layer deeper than what people typically look at when they talk about ICP, right? So you're mentioning kind of your ICP where, you have a sense that they use spreadsheets. Like one signal that we look at very similar is we look at job postings. So we look at what kind of job postings they have out there. What tech stack do they mention in the job posting? Are they hiring for sales enablement? Do they have like a head of sales enablement, and what kind of tools do they mention in their sales enablement team, right? Do they have a high touch, or do they even have anything? And all those elements might give you an even like more refined sense of not just are they an ICP, what kind of ICP are they, right? Because you might have your kind of like low maturity ICP that they've never really done sales training. They have a couple reps, kind of works, but they have spreadsheets. They've never really structured a program. And then you're going to have companies that are maybe at a more mature stage. They have programs, but it's not working well. And so the way you want to pitch them what you have to sell is going to be very different. And those kind of like more refined signals are things that you can find through, what does the org look like? What kind of, again, job postings are they mentioning? What kind of social mentions are they posting out there? And all that kind of information can bring you a more granular definition and perspective on the ICP.
And so you've built the algorithms to figure this all out. How about LinkedIn? How do you find people in Facebook forums, everything they talk about in forums as well as LinkedIn? Is that how you extract?
Yeah, LinkedIn is one of the prime sources, typically because our customers are mainly B2B they sell to organizations, fairly large organizations. So typically LinkedIn is really the first source that they're going to look at, especially on the social side. Yeah, we haven't really tapped that much into Facebook yet, which I think is a little bit noisier typically from what we've seen. But yeah, LinkedIn is just an incredible source of intel.
Okay, and so now you've actually integrated AI into your platform, correct?
Correct. And the platform we were doing AI and machine learning before it was cool. So now it is a core part of the product, and kind of always has been.
Yeah, and so for a lot of listeners out there, I mean, there's language models, there's machine learning. How would you simplify building out AI? Because I mean, there's these huge models like ChatGPT, right? But can you actually do it yourself and build out your own AI? You're a data scientist. I have a data scientist on my team. She's way smarter than I am, but she helps me make sense of the data and what we can do with the data. How do you help companies do that? And or if they don't want to do it themselves, they can just go to MadKudu. But you guys, as data scientists, as mathematicians, have essentially built AI, and you've been doing it since 2012. So to simplify for the audience, what is AI, machine learning, or language learning, and how have you been building it even before ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think sometimes people make it seem like bigger than what it is, or more complex than what it actually is. I think that the way I think about it is ultimately machine learning is it's smart automation, right? So for example, like when you're thinking of ICP models, like one of the typical things that people do is what we call regression. So you say, these are the people who converted into customers. These are the people who didn't. And you give that to the machine and you tell it, okay, figure out what's different about the people who became customers from the people who didn't. And it's called regression because it's trying to walk back from the outcomes that we observed, trying to walk back to the attributes and figure out, okay, like companies that have less than 5 reps typically haven't converted, but people that have between 5 and 20 reps were really the sweet spot. And then if they had Salesforce, that makes them even better. So that alone is machine learning, right? Because you're giving information, the outcome, and some inputs to the machine, and you're letting it figure out what is the relationship between the inputs and the outcome. So that's been something that, that's been done for a very long time. One of the elements that's really interesting about this is, neural networks, which are what power large language models like ChatGPT, have been around for a very long time, but they are black boxes. It's very difficult to understand what's going on in there. And even today, we struggle to understand how ChatGPT functions. And there's a lot of research papers that are being shipped almost like weekly and trying to understand what's going on in there. So one of the challenges with that is when you operate in a sales, when you're trying to help sales, explainability is critical. Like salespeople are very quick to form an opinion and to abandon any kind of solution. So using the right kind of machine learning when you're trying to help salespeople is really critical. Using anything that's black box might give you like great prediction capabilities, but if you're unable to explain anything, at the first error the algorithm is going to make, salespeople are done. They never want to hear about it again. So it's really, I think for people out there, it's important to realize that ChatGPT is very powerful, but it is still just like a basic prediction engine. But what's tricky about it is that it is a complete black box. You cannot understand why it predicted the thing it predicted. And so when using it, you have to be very careful about where you use it. If you're using it to predict what is the right email to send someone, that's fine. Nobody is going to be overly upset if it didn't write the correct email. But if you're doing some kind of ICP modeling that's going to define who gets routed to sales or not, that's not a great option. Because if it makes a mistake, nobody is going to be able to go look under the hood to understand what happened. And that's like it's a terrible way to build a routing mechanism. So essentially, like the way we've been thinking about this is there's a whole suite of machine learning models that can be deployed. And based on what we're trying to accomplish, how much explainability we need or not, we're going to determine, do we need kind of the more like classic and like open model, or can we go with something like an LLM?
Yeah. And so for you and your organization at MadKudu, how have you utilized AI to enhance your product, and how has it made it better?
In many ways, like from the ground up, I think on the engineering side, we've built our own AI agents that now ship code. So whenever we run into a bug in the application, we're able to just give it to an AI agent that's going to scan our code base, our documentation, propose a fix, and then push it to production if it's approved by a human. So that just means that we're able to spend more time on building new features because a lot of the drudgery of engineering is done by the machines. Then on the sales side, we've built a lot of automation. So for example, in our sales process, our reps, so we record our calls with Gong, and then our reps also are asked to take notes. And what we do is we then take the notes and the call recording, put them into an AI that we've built, and that's going to generate a proposal automatically. So it's able to identify what are the pain points that were mentioned by the customer, and then create a before after slide that explains what are the problems that they're having today in their prospecting. How is MadKudu actually going to help do that? And that just saves a ton of hours to our reps because they can just be focused on the call, focused on asking the questions that they know are going to be relevant to build that proposal automatically. And then they can ship the proposal 5 minutes after the call is over. So the velocity at which we operate is a lot greater. And we have a clear incentive for our reps to ask questions. It's not just for the sake of filling in Salesforce fields. It's because it's going to help them put together a really meaningful and impactful proposal within minutes of the call ending.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And even I caught, it's too funny because I've went from doing door-to-door sales to selling, in malls and different products and services, and then offering credit cards and ADT alarms. And then I got into the software business to manage my own team with rewards, recognition, competition, compensation, literally triggering their psychology to keep them doing what I need them to do for them to be successful and for us to be successful. And so I went into the software, and I realized, I'm constantly pivoting from literally selling to one-on-one, to selling one-on-many, to selling in a boardroom, selling from the stage. Like I've had a long journey of sales. And I realized when I got into the software industry and I listened to some of the individuals, chief revenue officers or sales leaders, a lot of the times when they send out the proposal, they kind of miss the boat. And I'm like, okay, great. So you're sending out this proposal. It's a one pager and it's all about how many users and the pricing. But as you just said, what problem are we solving? What is the before and after? And so that's genius and brilliant how you don't allow a proposal to even go out, and it's automated based on the conversation and what is all the pain points and how are we going to solve them? And that's the proposal. The numbers are just the numbers. The investment should pay for itself based on it solving the problem. So I love that. So can you share one of your favorite stories of companies that you've helped, and how have you transformed? Because a lot of people sell transactionally. That one page, okay, here's the price, here's the users. That's a transactional sale versus what you're doing, which is a transformational sale. What's going to be the before and after? Tell us a couple stories about clients that you've helped that totally transformed potentially not only their sales process, but their organization.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of stories around that. One of them that I think was pretty telling is this one customer that is in the design space, collaborative design. So they're a company that has millions of users. So it's just like a lot of volume coming in. And what's really interesting is that for the longest time, the organization was really focused on solving routing as a pure data science problem, right? It was really about like, need better analytics to figure out who do we hand over to sales. And they always approached it from a purely scientific perspective without ever thinking, what is actually the perspective of sales, right? Like, how do we get their feedback and how do we act on their feedback? Because like they have something, like no matter how good your model is, if it's not being used by the field, you might as well not have a model. And what was interesting was because of the way, like people build models, so there's technical people, so they build this in like their own little like studio, like somewhere, data science studio. And then they ship a model, which generally is like a propensity model. It's a score from 0 to 100. Ship it into Salesforce, and then hope for the reps to actually go and call the ones that are 90 to 100, and then if they don't, kind of like whip them into obedience and never really ask for anything in return. It's like literally, if you're not calling them, that's a problem. Like bad salesperson. And when we brought MadKudu in, we got the organization to understand this thing that no matter how good your model is, if it's not being adopted by the sales team and if the sales team is not giving you feedback, then you might as well not have a model. And you could do random model and they can guarantee it's almost going to be as good. And that really transformed the way the organization was thinking, because now they had a tool where the reps could see, okay, this is like a 95 out of 100 score. These are the reasons why. This is what you're recommending me to tell this person. And the reps would actually, when they would disqualify or when they would qualify, they would give feedback. And that opened communication channels between the sales and marketing team, which, as crazy as it might seem, were just not open before. And it became tactical. It was no longer like kind of hand waving and like, oh, salespeople are lazy. They're not calling the MQLs we're sending them. And then salespeople saying marketing is again just sending us like garbage over the fence, hoping for us to make miracles happen. And we could actually talk about this particular lead. Why did we dispose it? Why did we think it was not the right ICP? And it led to identifying specific gaps in training where they realized there was one industry, so banking, which was, it's a highly regulated industry. And so there's a little bit more scrutiny in what kind of tools they can bring in. And the reps, like some of the reps essentially had failed in the past selling to this highly regulated industry. So now whenever they would see something from the financial sector, they would kind of dispose the lead immediately because they felt like they couldn't sell to it. And until we came in and like gave them the ability to have this conversation by, getting them around the table and looking at the same data, this was a complete blind spot in the organization. And then they realized, okay, we need to arm the sales team with the right kind of collateral to explain, how do we work with, highly regulated industries, and why is our product actually able to work in there? Like, what are the compliance rules and regulations that we are certified against, and all that kind of stuff. And that helped the team understand it was a problem there. Then they ran enablement sessions, and now they were crushing their quote on that. So that's maybe a specific example of how the tool itself wasn't necessarily the solution, but the tool led to aligning the teams and having the teams discuss and around a shared reality of what was going on. And that was really, I think, impactful for us and meaningful, because we felt like we're able to bring people, like take people away from their preconceived notions of how each other think and actually center them around the same data truth.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I mean, it's a never ending problem with sales and marketing, pointing fingers, right? So the leads suck or your sales sucks. Right? The salespeople suck, or marketing gives us leads that suck, or they're not qualified. And my methodology to solve that, and I'm the old school guy that hasn't built, doesn't have a background in data scientists, but now my sales and marketing, they work together at the hip. So sales, you define the ICP, and then marketing brings it to you, right? And I've talked to, literally, we've had some excellent individuals on the show that work with NVIDIA, with Google, and they're like, no. The challenge most of the time is the teams are separated and they have a different ICP. We bring them everybody bring them together. Sales determines the ICP, and then marketing says, okay, this is the clients you want. This is the clients we're going to bring you. And that eliminates that. You're doing it with automation. So I love that, because that's where there's a lot of friction within organizations, and that's why they don't move forward. And both teams, I believe, have a blind spot. They just don't see what the other person sees, right? But when you bring them together, you eliminate that animosity and pointing fingers, because now we're all in it together. If you're enjoying this episode and you're picking up what I'm putting down and what the guests are actually putting out there, do me a favor, like and comment what you liked about the episode, or even comment what would you like to hear, what topics would you like to hear in the future, because believe me, it matters. I read absolutely every single one of them, and I want to bring you more and more value to help companies scale so that we can grow this podcast to make a bigger difference. Now let's get back to the show. What are some of the most common mistakes you see when you work with organizations with your technology that the salespeople are making?
I think on the sales side, what's interesting is that salespeople are very good at telling stories, and I feel like they're not necessarily as data oriented as marketing, which is actually one of the sources of friction, right? Sales is going to think of ICP as like, what are the last 5 deals I closed? And that becomes their ICP. Like, bring me more of those 5. And marketing is more about, oh, let's look at like statistics and like how many companies and, this industry make our customer base and whatnot. I think oftentimes organizations try to ask sellers to give these more higher level trends. Oh, like what are you seeing work well as a trend? And sales just frankly are rarely good at doing that. They remember the last conversation. They remember the last deal that went well. But like giving you like a holistic trend of how things are going in one direction or another is not something that they're good at, which is actually good, right? Because you want them to just focus on every deal individually rather than just like thinking of the grander scheme of things. So that's one thing that I find companies struggle with, is they try to ask sales to give feedback at a statistical level, which generally isn't great. The part where I think I find the best reps, or actually the reps who are best suited to become managers, are the ones who don't sell on intuition. And I think that's where some organizations have incredible reps that perform really well, but have a very hard time distilling why. Like if you ask them, what is your recipe? Like, why are you closing X compared to this other person? They don't know, right? It's like just to have this thing where they connect with the prospect. They do multi-threading kind of like organically. They just know that the person they're talking to is not the buyer, and they're going to go look for that buyer. They're going to multi-thread. They're going to prospect into the account they're already working, but they're not able to explain that. They can't just put words on what they're doing. And a lot of organizations just try to replicate the success of those people without distilling like into like a process what makes those people so successful. And I think trying to just slap technology on top of that is rarely something that works, because you have to understand what are these people doing that is so different, and how do we actually scale or automate or actually like put into a process the thing that they're doing. And automation is just scaling the process. But step one is to figure out what is working in our process. And I think many companies come to us and they hope that the SaaS solution that we're selling is going to solve their problem. But if you don't put a process in place, like it's always people, process, product. And if you just slap product and you're not addressing process or people, it's not going to work. And I think that trifecta is really critical. And the best VPs of sales and the best CROs I've seen out there are the ones who are really able to distill the reasons for success of their top reps. And they're able to understand how do I separate the process from the person to understand like this is the thing that we need to replicate. It's also like what are the people I want to bring in, but like what is the process I can replicate, and what are the products that can help me replicate this at scale? How do I make every person in my sales team closer to my top performer?
Yeah, and so as an example, so there's a lot of startups out there that they actually do a startup to solve a problem and solve their own problem, right? So as an example, I built a sales machine to solve my own problem. So I literally was managing over 2,000 guys myself. 2,000 salespeople with Excel spreadsheets and traveling every weekend to a different city and working in Southeast Asia and literally doing training and setting up rewards, recognition, compensation for all these different sales offices in Singapore, Indonesia, working with my colleagues in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Philippines. And I just couldn't keep up, right? It's just too much data, too many people, and implementing a system. So I went to different companies like Salesforce. I went to HubSpot. I actually used HubSpot for a while, Zoho. And essentially, these CRMs were, to me, just, a glorious address book. I'm like, okay, this is fine. We can keep our customer data, right? But what I need is something that drives performance for my salespeople to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So they just do it because people don't act for a couple different reasons. One is fear of making a mistake, right? And two is they just don't know how to do something and they don't want to screw it up. And, like in school, you're learning in school and the teacher asks you, who's got the answer? You raise your hand and then you give the wrong answer. And what does everybody do?
Yeah, they laugh.
That's correct. And so what happens to that child or people is now they don't want to raise their hand anymore. They're afraid. So I know, and I teach people. I understand what drives people. First of all is, giving them the right answers up front and then saying, okay, these are the answers to all of the tests. And here's the test. We can figure out why the things work later. But so I needed rewards, recognition, competition, compensation for an organization of 2,000 salespeople that actually drive sales by giving them a dashboard. Here's what you need to do, when you need to do it, how you need to do it on the left, and on the right is why you're doing it. Rewards, recognition, competition, compensation, leaderboards, social threading so you guys can communicate and congratulate one another. And I had this conversation with NetSuite, with Salesforce, with all these different organizations. And they're like, we don't have any idea what you're talking about, John. Look, you get your leads, you nurture the leads, you work the pipeline. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Nuh-uh. That doesn't drive behavior. And most of the CRMs out there are hard to use. 67%. You're a numbers guy, right? 67% of the technology bought and paid for in the CRM space is not even used because the salespeople are like, shit, I don't got time for data entry. I got to make my calls. Does that make sense? So I built out this whole thing and then I realized this works for me. But then when I want to go to market, a lot of the organizations weren't like me. They didn't want to invest in their people and pay per head. And then I came across manufacturing, distribution companies that are doing above 5 million and they're signing up. They're like, where have you been all my life? Because the CRMs they're using or their field engagement apps are garbage because it's a lot of data entry. And mine is just push a button, time in motion, add to cart, refill the stock on a retail store, like for modern trade. And it's just so easy that people can't even believe it. But you know what? Initially, I solved my own problem, built my own technology, but then I got it all wrong for the ICP because I was willing to invest that much because I was earning a lot of money, right? So have you ever discovered that people get it wrong because they built the technology for themselves? And then when they go to market strategy, isn't exactly the right ideal client.
Yeah, quite a bit. And I think the interesting thing is like we work with a lot of companies that are PLG, so product-led growth, right? So they build the product, you have a free trial or a freemium. What's really interesting about that is pretty often especially the founders of the company are really enamored with their product. And so they kind of feel like build it and they will come, right? So they build the product and they just can't believe that people are using the product but not buying the enterprise license. Why is that not the case, right? My salespeople must be doing something wrong. And that's where, to go a little bit deeper and realize, well, actually, maybe you have a positioning issue and maybe your pricing doesn't make sense, right? Like where this is the case with a lot of PLG companies where they have a real challenge going into like selling enterprise licenses, because then it's like, why would I pay an enterprise license when I can pay like $15 per user for my user base? And a lot of this positioning and understanding like who are the right ICP, right? The people who are willing to pay your enterprise price are probably not the people that are massively adopting your product. And this is where highly regulated industries come into play. They're willing to do like proper IT consolidation because they want everything overseen by the IT team. Whereas a lot of the tech companies, they're okay having like a bunch of licenses here and there. Same thing, right? Like tech companies that, pay for Salesforce, they're probably not interested in like a tool like Sales Machine. But then you go to organizations where, the lifetime of a rep and the tenure of a rep in the organization is much longer than in the tech space, where they're not just like churning a bunch of reps year after year. Now, all of a sudden, retention becomes really important. And so they're going to care about like, how do I make sure my reps feel cared for? Like they feel like they're progressing and like they feel like there is something that's really helping them. And that's when you start finding your ICP. And I think that's where a lot of people are so focused on the product and the thing that they build that they forget like who they're building it for. And they forget that like the ICP is less about who they are. It's more about what problem they have. And generally, people that look alike have the same kind of problems. But going back to like, what is the problem I'm solving for and who are the people likely to have that problem is something that I find too many people forget when they do the ICP analysis. Because they're just going to look at some high level metrics like I sell software. So of course, I'm looking for people that make a lot of revenue, have a lot of salespeople. And it's like, yeah, but what is the problem they're trying to solve? If it's like employee retention with like top performers in sales, then all of a sudden, like your compensation package is going to be really critical, like making sure that, the way you compensate, the way, you organize like these different competitions becomes really critical. If you're churning reps every 2 years, who cares about that? You're just going to hire another rep. And I think that's like one of the things that people forget. It's like the ICP is a kind of lagging indicator of the problem that people have. And so it's really like center on the problem. And then once you understand the problem, look for people that are likely to have that problem. And that will kind of define your ICP.
Yeah, you nailed it, because I'm speaking to one of the colas, and there's top 3 colas, and I built a proof of concept for number 3, right? And they were number 2, and they're pissed off. The owners are really upset that they're now number 3 because they were beating number 2, right? And they're trying to figure out what the problem is. And it took me several meetings to actually identify their biggest problem. It finally popped out of HR's mouth. We can't keep reps. Our reps are becoming Grab drivers, Uber drivers, because it's easy. They can just sit in the car. They're not doing deliveries. They don't have to go in and inventory count the stock shelves, right? The shelf. And so they're losing reps. And so you really, and so that's what I did. I touched on the pain, and now we're in a proof of concept, and we're moving that deal forward.
And that's why discovery is so important, right? Because no matter how much you pitch, how good your proposal is, if you haven't nailed that pain, you're never going to close that deal. And I think that's like why sometimes even though ICP is one of the core things that we do, I constantly try to coach our customers on thinking about like the ICP is a lagging indicator. It's like it's the materialization. It's the symptom of like a root cause. Like the root cause is the problem that you're going to solve with your product and your offering. That's the part that's the most important. And then that also comes into your PMM, right? It's like, if we're talking to these people, it's less about we're talking to these people. It's like, we're talking about this problem. And if we're talking about this problem, why is it a pain? Why does it need to be fixed? And how are we going to make it look better in the future? And that is something that I find, especially organizations that have been very successful, regardless of the kind of like, it's not their fault they're successful, just right time, right place. And it works really well. They don't really know why. And so this is where, again, it goes back to like the intuition of like the seller who like intuitively is able to understand, like, or not able to understand, but is able to succeed. Those are the trickiest ones because it's hard to learn from them. And a lot of companies struggle when they had that initial success and then they realize, okay, like things are slowing down. How do we repeat this? How do we make this happen again? And they're not able to because they didn't understand, okay, like what happened in the first place? Oh, we found this problem that was really critical and we managed to solve it.
Yeah. And go back. So PMM, define PMM, because there's just so much terminology out there and acronyms for everything.
Yeah. So PMM is product marketing. So PMM to me is like really that bridge between product marketing and sales enablement. It's a role that's in charge of understanding your competitive pressures. Who are the competitors? Who speaks the same language as you? How do you differentiate? How do you present your value prop to different personas, to different ICPs, and really puts together a lot of that intel for then sales enablement to package it into training for the reps.
Yeah, got it. So, and that goes back to your people, process, and the product actually fulfilling the problem, right? Because ultimately people buy more for solving a problem than they do for pleasure. That's just reality. Right. Because, if, you got a toothache, yeah, you can deal with it. Take some Tylenol. But if you got a migraine, you got to handle it right now. Right. And a lot of the times, so I was listening to an audio on StoryBrand the other day, and the guy's like, so many people out there, our companies are, making people think. Stop making people think. Just solve the problem. So he goes, I was behind a U-Haul the other day and it says, queen size bed fits in our truck. He goes, I don't have to think. I know this is the size of truck I need, right? And he goes, so many people are out there, marketers, and they want to make people think or talk about the features. Find the root cause, right? But stop making people think. So I'm like, yeah, we help people sell more faster with automation. That's what we do, and retain their people. So, but discovery is gold. Without discovery, everybody's guessing. That's my take on all of it. And I've been building and scaling and leading sales teams for 30 years. Discovery is key. Come from service, never nervous. Like,
Yeah.
Find out what, and a lot of people, like you said, or organizations don't understand what's really going on in their organization. Like this COLA, they told me all their superficial problems, but the root cause is they haven't given enough incentive and long-term levels of development with their people to retain them. So they're leaving all of the time. And that's the root cause. So when organizations work with you, you're all about the signals. But when an organization comes to you, a lot of the times, what I find when I work with the organization is what worked then doesn't work now. New technology, new player in the marketplace, and different is better than better a lot of the times, right? When they come to you and they sign up for signals, you're the organization, MadKudu, that goes out there and finds all the buying signals, right? Have you ever had, and I know you have, organizations take you up on your offer, they implement it, but then they get it wrong. So because there's your unique selling proposition there, and then there's theirs. And then there's their ICP that they identified. And then you have to have a go-to-market strategy, which MadKudu can be a part of. So what's the biggest challenge you find in organizations? They see your value, your USP. You deliver the signals for go-to-market, and then they cannot close the deals.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge that we see is when the team internally lacks empathy with sellers. Like they don't understand what it is to actually be a seller. And this happens, unfortunately, fairly frequently in the market that we talk to people like this. Like most of the time we manage to get in front of sales reps and it helps them understand what's going on within the organization. But what I find is that there's this growing role of revenue operations, and a lot of the ethos behind this revenue ops organization is that they can automate 90% of the sales process. And I think a lot of the people in those positions like think of sales as a very mechanical process. And so they just want to automate every single step. And they feel like if they do that, they're going to be able to sell. And they focus more on solving like some of the symptoms that they see than understanding what the root cause is and like how the signals could potentially help address the signal. And they just like try to slap a solution onto what they see as a problem. And that, sometimes works, but like fairly frequently it fails. And the analogy I use with them is, if you're a doctor, someone walks into your office and saying, oh, like I have like terrible back pain, I need you to perform surgery. There's one type of person who's gonna be great, like let's go, like let's do surgery right now. And there's another doctor who's gonna be looking at you, spend a little bit of time and say, oh, by the way, did you notice that you've been walking with one shoe only for the last 6 months? Like maybe try putting 2 shoes on, and that's, like your back is going to feel better. And like that thing is diagnostic, right? It comes from like trying to put yourself in the shoes of this person to understand like what might be the root cause of the pain and solve it the right way, rather than just say, I'm a surgeon, surgeon's going to operate, like, let's go. And I think that takes a little bit of empathy. It takes understanding what selling requires. And the signals are not everything. Like the last thing you want to do is just like take a bunch of signals and then dump everything onto the sales rep's lap. Be like, now you have all the signals. If you don't close anything, that's your fault. It's like, well, selling takes a little bit more than that. Like, how do we help the reps think less? Because they're overwhelmed with information. They have to go onto LinkedIn. They're getting emails. They're getting people who like text them. There's just a lot going on. And the role of the organization should be to put, a process and products to help people be focused on where they can have the highest leverage. And I think there are too many organizations where the people that are putting the processes together don't understand where the leverage is for sellers. And because of that, they apply solutions in the wrong places. And I think if there's one thing that people could be doing better out there is every person in the go-to-market organization should spend 1 day with a seller. Like just, be there, listen to their calls, watch them draft cold emails, watch them make cold calls, watch them get like hung up directly when they're calling someone, like feel that pain of what it is to sell, just to understand how hard it is to sell, so that next time you go complaining about the fact that they didn't fill in a Salesforce field because blah, 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 then you realize, okay, like I get it. Like their life is hard and I'm making it harder by asking them to fill in 7 fields when they just lost a deal that they've been working on for 7 months. Like that lack of empathy that I see in organizations very frequently comes from the fact people just refuse to understand, or just don't understand how hard it is to be a salesperson. They just look at the movies, like all these reps like showing up in their fancy car with a fancy watch, and like they, master the room, and like they can talk well, and they're the jocks from college, and they have this idea that that's the case, but that's not actually the reality. Like selling is hard. It's a lot of rejection. It takes a lot to just like overcome like the constant rejection and like moving on to the next deal and forgetting, like being a goldfish. Okay, we lost that one. Let's go get the next one. And I think if people understood that better, they would be building their organizations with sellers in mind. And I think they would be a lot more successful.
You pointed something out to me that I just haven't even realized, and it's automatic for me because I really love and cherish my salespeople, and I always have, because I've started out going door to door. Went door to door in Haight-Ashbury Street, and in San Francisco, and Fisherman's Wharf, and Oakland, California, where I had one of my most unique experiences, where a crackhead came out in boxer shorts, a kitchen knife, and said, "Give me your merchandise." And he was literally going to stab me for the merchandise, right? And I've grown a lot from selling novelty items door to door, stuffed animals, and you couldn't believe the different stuff I've sold, and literally had people, I would just go door to door, and they're like, "Do you have a permit?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm just trying to make some money." And then I have people throw things at me, swear at me, want to come out of the business, want to fight me, literally take all these no's. And so, I know how hard it is to sell, even at the most challenging sales ever can be door to door, right? You get a couple hundred no's in a day. So you have to develop a rhino skin just to keep going. And now I'm selling enterprise level software, and I've sold from the stage, and I've sold from, but I realize what you're saying. A lot of organizations lack empathy, and the greatest salespeople in the world are the ones that have empathy, and they come from service. That's why they don't get nervous, because for me, like, sales is curiosity. I'm just so curious, how can I solve this individual's problem and help them transform for their salespeople? Because I'm focused front of the house, help the sales guy, right? And I think that gets lost in translation. It's funny that you actually recognize that, especially with what you do and providing the right leads for salespeople. I love it. I love what you do. I love how you do it. So for the most part, who's your ideal client that you work with, so that our listeners can reach out and obviously get involved with MadKudu, so that they can, create some new mad results for their salespeople?
Yeah, I would say if you're an organization that has more than 50, like call it 50 to 500 salespeople that do prospecting, then you're a good fit for us. And you're prospecting to, like, your prospects have an online presence. That's usually like the really sweet spot, because as a rep, then you're looking for breadcrumbs online. You're trying to figure out, like, what are my prospects talking about? What are they doing? What are they hiring for? And we take all of that data and synthesize it to a rep, say, this is what's going on this account. This is who you should be talking to. This is why. And we kind of give them like a brief. So it's almost like an AI personal assistant for every single rep, so that they have this kind of account brief ready for them with, like, this is what's happening on the account. These are the people you should be reach out. And this is the kind of message that you can send them. So trying to do a lot of that drudgery for them, so that the reps can focus on what they do best, which is connecting with the prospect, running discovery to figure out, pinpoint what is the problem that there is to solve, and then helping the customer understand why solving this problem is going to bring them to a much better place.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you want an unfair advantage and you want radically new results to transform your organization from the man, the mad scientist behind MadKudu that will allow you to scale your organization sustainably and scalably. Reach out. It's MadKudu. Francis, thank you for being on the show. It's been remarkable. I've learned a lot. I'm going to take a lot away from it and implement even in my organization. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And if you got value from this episode, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and refer a friend. And if you want even more value, go to thesalesmachine.com, click on resources, and there's tons of resources there to increase profits and drive performance in your business. Right on, come on.